Hello, it's Lou Collins. Today I'm coming to you with a brand new beginner's stamping tutorial. Now this is going to cover what you need for stamping and the very basics. So if you're new to card making and paper crafts, this is ideal for you because there's a lot out there on the market, probably a lot that you may be a little bit confused about. Do you need them? What products do you use with what tools? So I'm going to hopefully explain all of that in this quick video. So the first thing of course you need is some stamps. We have a huge range at Craft Stash, lots and lots of different brands. Some of them will be clear like this. Some of them will say photopolymer on them. That just means they're a really good quality stamp. You'll see that reflected usually in the prices as well, but any clear stamp is going to work really well. You also have things like grey rubber and red rubber stamps. They are usually your finer detail stamps, and they are also reflected in the price, a little bit higher in price for those ones, but there's such a huge range. You can get them for your words, you can get them for your images, you can get them large backgrounds, line drawings to colour in, all sorts. So I'm going to be using my own textures range here to demonstrate stamping for you. You'll find all of those at Craft Stash as well. Now to stick your stamps to, because your stamps are simply clear and they just come like so. So they're not very stable, they're flexible. You need an acrylic block to stick these onto. Now there's lots of different stamping platforms available, but the basics are your acrylic blocks here. They're almost like just a piece of thick acrylic. Some of them have guidelines on and they come in all sorts of different shapes and sizes. I would say if you're just starting, maybe either get a multi-pack where you've got one large and a couple of smaller ones, or just get yourself one large one that will fit all your stamps on for the time being. Now, there are a few other items that you may find helpful as well that are not essential, but most people, once they start stamping, they find they need them. And that's these three items here. So this is a stamping platform. Now, what it does, it's a kind of a multi-tool because it has your equivalent of an acrylic block inside. So you'll stick your stamp to here. You've got your base, and very often the base is magnetic, so you've got your magnets here, and what this will do is hold your paper or your cardstock still. So I'll be using one of these because these are very popular now. You'll find them available in lots of different brands, lots of sizes and things like that, and a lot of them have different features. This is the one from the Creative brand. As you can see, it's messy, I use it all the time, but I do prefer to use a stamping platform as opposed to an acrylic block. But again, acrylic blocks are your cheaper alternative, and they are great if you're just beginning. Now, a couple other things you may find helpful as you progress through stamping is, not that one, we want this one, these two. So obviously cardstock. You're going to need paper or cardstock to stamp onto. Now I'd absolutely recommend smooth white cardstock. This is perfect, it's stamping card. This is from the Creative brand. It's, I think it's about 250, 290 GSM, something like that. But because it's smooth, you get a lovely, perfect impression with your stamping, whatever ink you're using. So you can find that, I think 30 sheets for $7.99, something like that, on Craft Stash. Hopefully we'll link it all in this blog post for you. And then this little bag is, it's magic. It's anti-static powder inside. If you progress onto heat embossing, this is going to be perfect for you. You simply tap this all over the surface of your paper before you stamp and then heat emboss, and it helps to reduce the static on your paper, and that way your heat embossing powder won't fly around and stick to other areas. It also helps if you've managed to get any greasy marks from your fingers, maybe you have hand cream on a lot, and that helps to just dust off the paper so that the ink goes where you want it to go. Now, usually you wouldn't use this so much with stamping until you start heat embossing, but it's a good tool to know what it's for so you don't purchase one unnecessarily. Now let's just move on very quickly to the inks, and then we'll do a quick little bit of stamping. So I've picked out 4 different inks for you just to start with, because these are common names that you'll hear in the craft industry, just so you know roughly what they do. Now, one of the least common ones people use are probably this. This is a StazOn, or it's called a solvent ink. StazOn is the most popular brand of this, and this is basically an ink that will stick to absolutely any surface. Now there are a range of colours, but the colours are limited in comparison to something like your distress inks, which we're going to come to later. You have your basic colours in all of these, and this one, yeah, like I say, it sticks to absolutely any surface, even something like plastic, glass. If you want to stamp on any of those surfaces, this is going to be ideal. It's very smelly, but yeah, it's a great one to have in your stash, maybe in your basic colours like black, maybe a brown for later on. Now, one of the most common ones for doing your detail stamping, and that's things like your words. If you want to stamp an image and you want to colour it in, it's going to be your VersaFine Clair, or it could be your Memento ink. That's another brand. Let me just see if I can find an ink pad. I doubt I can. I've probably not got one to, here we go. There you go, that's what a Memento looks like. There's a grey one. These are both great for your details, so you'll be able to use these to stamp. You'll get a really, really good impression. It will be really detailed, absolutely beautiful, fine lines, and they dry really quickly as well. So I would suggest either of these in black when you just start doing your basic outlines and your detailed sentiments and words. Versamark is, this is again, it's a brand, but it's obviously it's a similar brand to the VersaFine from Sukiniko. But with this one, we're going to be looking at, it's clear. So it's an embossing ink. Now you'll probably more likely find that these are called embossing inks. There's some from, for example, Wow is another brand. And they're a clear ink, but they're a very, very sticky ink. What happens is this ink doesn't dry. So if you want to do heat embossing later on, it will dry. It's very, very slow drying. Sorry, should I say? It's very slow drying. So it will dry eventually. If you want to do heat embossing and have heat embossing powder stick to your stamped image, this is what you'll want to use. You can do heat embossing with other inks, but I would definitely suggest, because as a beginner you may be a little bit slower in the process, use an embossing ink to give you that time to get things right. This again is very similarly priced to everything else, but because it's clear, you're not going to use it for a huge amount. Now, because it's clear and it is called Versamark, this particular one, it does leave a watermark on your paper. If you don't heat emboss it, you can simply use this to do a very, very subtle background where it just shows a shade or two lighter than the cardstock. Sometimes people want that subtle look, so it's a handy one again to have in your arsenal. And lastly, I want to talk about distress oxides and distress inks, because the mistake a lot of people do make is thinking that they'll pick up some stamps, acrylic blocks or stamping platform and inks, and they'll go for these to stamp with. These are not ideal for stamping with. You can stamp with them, absolutely, but very often this is for textured looks, distressed looks, not perfect impressions, and often that's to do techniques where people then go ahead and they use things like water to make the image sort of move the ink around, things like that. So if you're looking for perfect stamping, these either distress ink or distress oxide in the multiple colours they come in. There's about 70 odd colours for each. They're not going to be ideal for stamping in the beginning. There are lots of techniques out there where people do stamp with these, but they are progressing into more advanced stamping. So if you are a beginner, I would avoid these for stamping right now. What I can do is just show you a quick example of why this is and what happens when you do stamp one of these. So let's just do some very, very basic stamping very quickly. So I'm just going to pop my cardstock on my paper and use the magnets to hold it down onto my magnetic base. I'm going to take, let's take one of the words rather than the butterflies. Let's take, this is your, oh no, Fly High, lots of detail in this one. I'm going to place this, it's all clean, you can wash these with soapy water, that's absolutely fine. Always, always allow your stamps to air dry. Never try drying them with a kitchen towel or a tea towel or anything like that, because you'll leave fibres on the stamp and that will affect your stamping next time. So leave to air dry, and they will then go clingy again as such. You'll see why we need the clingy in a moment. So what I'm going to do also is use the word beautiful, and let's stamp this one down here. You can do multiple stamps at a time if you wish. So I've placed them on my cardstock. I'm just going to bring my platform over and lift up those stamps. So what will happen is those stamps cling, as I said, to the acrylic or the plastic part of the platform. And now we can apply our ink. Now, because I want detail in this top one, I want this to be a really good image, I'm going to use the VersaFine Clair or the Memento to get that detail. So I'm just going to press the stamp all over This one's actually starting to dry out, this one. It's not a very good example. It's actually quite a faint one, but let's press really hard. They do dry out after a while. Eventually you need to replace the inks, of course. Good idea to store these upside down as well, so the ink, what ink is there, remains on the surface. So there we go. I'm not sure if I've got a newer one on me. I don't think I have. I think I need to unwrap a new one. So that's that. And then I'm going to also stamp in a distress ink, as I said, ideally not to do, but I want to show you the difference. Now, you'll probably notice when you're closer up, the distress ink, as you put that onto your stamp, it does pool on the surface of the stamp. And this is part of the reason you're never going to get a perfect image. So now I'm just pressing down with the stamping platform. Wherever you press down on here, the entire platform is going to go down, so you get nice even pressure. So where I've got ink on my platform accidentally from my ink pad, it's not going to reach the surface of the paper because the stamp will. So you can open this up and have a quick look, and what we can see is we've got a lovely detailed image there. Absolutely perfect. Because my ink's running out, I've got a little bit of greying there. I can go over, I can now re-ink this stamp if I wanted to, and I could pop this over and go again. And because I'm using a stamping platform, that's going to be in exactly the same place. There we go, that's even darker now. If I was using an acrylic block, it's very, very difficult to re-ink and re-stamp in the same place, although you can see through your block, and you will do exactly the same. You will put your cling stamp onto your block, you will ink it, and then you'll turn it over and you'll put it onto your paper. That is going to be difficult to reline up. So you can see there the VersaFine ink is absolutely perfect. Now what will also happen is that will not react to water there, so that will stay as it is. I can go and use watercolours with it, for example. Now this yellow one, I just wanted to spray this with water. Now first of all, don't know how well you could see, but that wasn't a perfect impression. There were lots of gaps within the word, and that's because, as I said, when we put the ink onto the surface of the stamp, it pooled. Now I've added water to that, hopefully you can just see that ink is all starting to run. Not perfect if you want to use watercolours. Even some glues that you use over the top of your stamping or near your stamping can affect your stamped image. So as I say, distress ink, distress oxide, leave these ideally for blending, colouring things in and such. If you want really precise, clean detail, use your VersaFine or your Memento inks. So hopefully that's given you a little bit of an overview into stamping. Any questions, do pop them in the comments and I'll come back and try to answer anything. You can find everything I've used here over on the Craft Stash website, and we'll try to link as much as possible below.